I think it's also helpful to just not be afraid to put yourself out there too. I think a lot of bloggers can be afraid to be the one to initiate the conversation, and sometimes that's how it has to get started, and I think that's okay.
That was Stephanie Wise, and this is episode 70 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I am your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Each week, my goal is to share with you thoughts, interviews, stories, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Today, I'm talking to Stephanie Wise of the site Girl vs. Dough. Stephanie and I are talking about how she's grown her freelance work as a result of starting her blog. And, you know, we've talked about this before, how important it is to know the different revenue models that are available to you as a food blogger and to find ways to diversify that. So first of all, let's talk about the different revenue models, because I actually have written a post called the top 3 revenue models. And I kind of broken it down by one of them is ads focused, one of them is sponsored work focused, and one of them is product focused. In other words, creating your own products for your site. And I think that each of those models have kind of different implications for how you grow your blog. And although you may pick a primary source of revenue from your site, I do think it's important to diversify. And it's something that I've heard many other bloggers that have been on this podcast talk about as well, that diversifying the revenue that you get is really important. And so, you know, there are forces outside of your control that might implicate, you know, how much revenue you're making in a general month. So for example, you might actually see an increase in traffic in one month and a decrease in revenue from ads just because of the rate that's being paid for ads during that month. So there's just a lot going on, and I think diversifying your revenue is important. And so that's why Stephanie joined me today to talk a little bit about how she grew her freelance work, and we kind of break it down a little bit and talk about why it's important to get out there and meet with brand representatives. She talks about how that for her, that meant going to conferences. It also meant reaching out to them on social media. And she also did a little research to figure out who to reach out to and sent pitch emails as well. So we talk a little bit about all 3 of those processes and how that worked for her. It can be a little daunting at times, and that's why I love this conversation with Stephanie. I really feel like she's really shared a lot of great tips. So before we get on to that interview, just a quick word about the Chopped Conference. I am so pleased to announce that Allie Ebright of the site Gimme Some Oven is going to be joining us as a speaker this year. Listen to her topic. It's going to be this: real blogging behind the scenes, navigating the unpredictable ups and downs of business, dealing with comparison, avoiding burnout, and loving your blog. Doesn't that sound so exciting? I'm always so inspired every time I talk with Allie, and you can listen to her on episode 10 of the Chopped Podcast talking about avoiding the dangers of comparison. She has an amazing and powerful perspective on being a creative entrepreneur, and I know you're going to get a lot of great value out of hearing her. So head to choppedcon.com today and click on register to buy your ticket. I can't wait to see you there. Let's get right to today's featured interview with Stephanie Wise. So put on those earbuds, turn up the volume, and let's talk about all things food blogging and so much more. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Stephanie Wise of the site Girl vs. Dough on the show today. Hey Stephanie, welcome to the Chopped Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. We're going to talk a lot about, the work that you've done with freelance work as a result of having started your blog. But first, I just wanted to take a step back and let everybody know, how it is that you started your food blog. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I've been blogging. It'll be 7 years this year, which is forever, but it doesn't
Yes.
feel like that long. And I actually got started. So my background is in journalism, and I had just graduated from college, and I was looking for jobs in journalism, and it was really hard to find one. So I kind of started the blog. It was kind of a mashup of my passion for baking just as a hobby. And then I wanted to kind of have this online resume with my writing. So I started the blog like a few months after I graduated, and it was just for fun for a few years. I eventually did get a job at a newspaper, and so I kind of did the blog on the side for fun. And over time, it kind of turned into a more lucrative career for me. And then I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I went full time with my blog, and I've been doing that pretty much ever since. So that's kind of the short story. Yeah.
I think journalism it's an interesting career because I can see where, it seems like print media has been on a decline recently. However, it was a perfect timing as far as the journalism and writing skills for your blog. It seemed to work perfectly there.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was a natural fit. And it's obviously different writing, but it's the kind of writing that I always wanted to do and wasn't necessarily able to have that outlet at my job. So
I have to ask you this because,
Sure.
well, my neighbor across the street, when I first met her, told me that she teaches at our local university and she teaches English. And I was like, oh no. Because, when she asked me what I did, I thought, and I told her that I have this blog. And then she goes into how she's, professor of English. And I just thought, oh my gosh, the kind of writing that goes on a blog and the kind of writing that maybe is in a book is so different.
It is. Yeah, it is. But the same principles apply, for as far as like grammar and, how you write sentences, that kind of thing. So, and it's funny that you say that because actually like some of my old professors will read my blog and they're really intrigued by the type of writing. Like they're not like turned off by it. It's just different,
Yeah, it's kind of more conversational, I think, in nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I always like to think I'm trying to have a very welcoming feeling, or maybe like I'm emailing a friend or things like that.
Right.
That's kind of the approach that I take with it.
Yeah, me too. Very conversational and down to earth.
Yeah. So have you always been interested in cooking?
Yeah, I think it's always been like part of my life. My grandmother cooks and bakes a lot. My mother cooks and bakes a lot. So I think I grew up with that passion, but I never really had any idea that I was going to be doing anything with that as a full-time job. It was definitely writing. Like that's all I wanted to do. So yeah, this is kind of a happy surprise that I can do both together. So
yeah. So was it after college maybe? I mean, I guess, at some point we all have to do our own cooking, and that kind of creates an interest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, because in college, I think I had an oven in my dorm for one semester maybe. And I think we were just using box mixes, to make cake whenever we really wanted cake. So
yeah, I don't know why I all of a sudden like flashed to that, Orange is the New Black, where they're like, trying to make a cheesecake and
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it was very like just very jury rigged kind of way of baking. So so I think the real passion for the type of baking that I enjoy doing now is it kind of derived from I had gotten married just after college and had somebody else that I needed to feed, and so it was kind of like a personal challenge for me to come up with like healthy, good meals for me and my husband to eat. And then the baking aspect, the whole premise of my blog originally was that I had never baked a loaf of bread before in my life, like yeast bread. So I was like, well, why don't I just put that on the internet for everyone to see my experience, trying to learn how to do that. So that's how like it got started. And so I would not recommend like going back to the first maybe year of my blog. It was a little rough, but
well, it speaks to the power of being vulnerable, being so open about what you don't know is really powerful sometimes.
Yeah. And I think it just kind of goes with part of my mission, I guess, is that anyone can bake bread. Like it's not as scary as people sometimes make it seem. So, I learned how to do it on my own.
So you know what? Now the name of your site is making sense to me. Girl versus dough. Who's going to win?
Exactly. Yeah, that's how it started. I had like this whole theme with like in the ringer with like bread. It was kind of ridiculous, but yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about food photography because, it's something that everybody wrangles with at one point or another. Did you walk in with your own photography skills intact, or did you have to
Oh
develop
no.
those?
No. Yeah, I don't think I hardly took any pictures when I started. And again, you can totally tell when you look at the beginning of my blog. But yeah, that's been a journey in itself that I'm obviously still continuing. So
Aren't we
yeah, it was
all?
just
Yeah.
right. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that just kind of developed along with my blog, and then having outside contributor work that I was doing for a while was just even more practice to not only just take better photos, but to take photos in the way that the brand wanted. That kind of the styling aspect. So
Yeah, I think the thing that can be so challenging about food photography, like, writing, you can get your own style out and you can, start to put together some patterns where it seems like food photography, like different times of the year can be different. Light versus dark can be different. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of variables involved. Time of
it's
day.
so true. Yeah. Well, I'm living in Minnesota where we still don't have
Seasons.
spring.
Yes.
It's been hard to find that light, to find the right light. So yeah, it's a learning experience.
Definitely.
Sure.
Okay, so over these last 7 years, what part has been the favorite thing that you've found about food blogging?
Oh man. I mean, I love developing the recipes and I love the writing, obviously. But I love the community that food blogging is and the people that I've met. I think that's probably my favorite part and very unexpected part too. I just never thought that this online space would create, so many real friendships that I have. So it's been fun.
That's really nice. I think, like you say, it does really take it beyond just the online world and turn it into something that's real friendships. Is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so would you describe anything as something that you don't like so much about blogging? I say this as I'm sitting here putting together my taxes and pulling my hair out.
Well, yeah, that's probably number one. That's like never a fun time of year. Gosh, I mean, I don't love social media or in terms of, all the scheduling and that kind of thing. Not my favorite, but I know it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I don't love photography. And I think it's just because it's so challenging to me. I mean, I don't know. It's like a love-hate relationship because sometimes I get really into it and it's fun. And then other times I'm like, I just wish like I didn't have to do it, so it's hard, but yeah.
Yeah. With photography, for me, it feels like when the outcome is good, then I love it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
If I can't get it to look like what I have in my head, then I hate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, why won't you work for me? So,
And some days, I mean, I took a food photography workshop with, I'm trying to think who it was. I think it might have been, I think it was probably Helene Desjardins.
Yeah.
Is that how you say her name? Helene?
I think it's Helene, or I don't know.
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with Helene Desjardins.
Okay.
And she actually said, if you've been at it for a while and you've taken 40 shots of the same thing, it is time to move on. Just let it go. Yeah. And I think that's true.
That's a good point because I think I get really just hung up on this one shot that I just need to get and it just doesn't work out all the time. So.
Yep. Sometimes you just have to move on.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so one of the main reasons I wanted to talk with you today was about the freelancing work that you've done as a result of, starting your food blog. I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about some of the freelance work that you've done over the years.
Yeah, so it's kind of been a long journey in itself too. So I started my freelance work probably the spring. So I started my blog in the fall, and then that following spring, I was contacted by Tablespoon, which is a website that is owned by General Mills. And they were looking for contributors to their blog. at the time. And so I started that. So that was 2010. And I worked with them, contributing recipes to just their site for a good 3 or even 4 years, maybe. And then as a result of that, I started working with Betty Crocker and their website, and then Pillsbury and their website. And then a couple years in, I started contributing for Bob's Red Mill. So that was partially on my blog with sponsored work and partially on their blog as a contributor. And then I started working with KitchenAid a couple years ago for their blog. And then, yeah, it's just kind of snowballed from there. I'm not going to like list all of them, but just a lot of like different types of work. Now I really only contribute to, outside of my blog, I only contribute to KitchenAid. The recipes are housed on my blog. So, but still doing a lot of freelance.
So what do you think were the reasons that happened for you? Did you, let people know that you were looking for these freelance gigs, or did you got one and that led to another?
Yeah. So, the Tablespoon one, if I remember correctly, because it was a long time ago, I was actually on the Plateful ad network. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember
Yeah, and that was owned by General Mills. And so I'm pretty sure Tablespoon found out about me through that. So they contacted me. And then as a result of being involved with Tablespoon and Plateful, I think I reached out for Betty Crocker and Pillsbury. And I think I just emailed like a contact that I had at Tablespoon asking, I knew that Betty Crocker was using blogger contributors, and I was really interested in working with them. So I think I just said, hey, can you put me in touch with, whoever does that. So it's kind of been a mix. I think Bob's Red Mill, I met my contact there at a blog conference, and I just made sure to follow up with her after the conference because I knew that that she was looking for contributors. Same with KitchenAid. I met my contact at a blog conference. So Red Star Yeast, I think I messaged them through Twitter. So this has been kind of a hodgepodge, but yeah, I mean, I'd say a good 80% of the people that I've reached out to have been really responsive and like welcoming. And sometimes they say no, I mean, right. That's the nature of it, but they're never like, mean about it or anything like that, so
we hate you.
Right. Yeah. Why are you even bothering? Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it just goes to show, like, if you put yourself out there, it might not work out at the time, but it could work out down the road or in a different capacity that you weren't expecting. So
I heard somebody say once that if you're not getting no on a regular basis, then you're not putting yourself out there enough.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah, rejection is just the whole part of the business, but it's okay.
Yeah, you have to kind of get a thick skin about it. And I think that starts even with just the idea, for me, like sometimes I can just be turned off of the idea of reaching out to somebody because I don't, I don't know who to reach out to. I don't, there's all these reasons, but you're a great example of like pushing through that.
Yeah, there's definitely been times where I tried to reach out and I'm like, okay, crickets. Like obviously I'm not contacting somebody through the right, medium or like, it's just not going to work out or whatever. But more often than not, I seem to be able to get in touch with somebody and something good comes out of it.
So let's break it down a little bit for people who might be interested. I mean, I know that bloggers are always looking for different revenue streams, and this sounds like one that would probably be of great interest to a lot of people. So when you're sending out an email, do you go into a lot of detail in that very first email, or you try to keep it brief?
I've done both, but I'd say more often than not, I keep it fairly brief. I have a media kit, but I don't just readily share it. I generally wait to see if the brand is interested in that kind of information. But But mostly I kind of just have this pitch that I give that, I explain who I am, what my blog is, what my mission is with my blog. And then I just ask them, what kind of opportunities they're offering for bloggers. And I try to keep it pretty quick and short and sweet, because I think if it gets to be too long, they might start not really reading the email or glancing over it. So
yeah, and then it can kind of take on, I mean, I know this from my own pitches too, like it can kind of take on an air of desperation if you go to too much information,
Yeah. You start having like bullet points and just no.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
Just keep it quick.
Are you clarifying between whether this is a pitch to be a sponsored post or a pitch to write for their site?
I think both. I think I've done that in both situations, and it seems to be effective.
But you don't mix the two, in other words. Like you'll have one pitch that's for writing for their site or a different pitch for a sponsored post on your site?
Yeah. And when I pitch to a brand, I make sure I do a little bit of research. I see if they are working with other bloggers in the form of contributors, or if they're doing just sponsored posts, because I don't want them to think that I'm doing this generic pitch to a bunch of brands, because I don't do it that way. I make sure that I genuinely enjoy the brand that I'm pitching to, personally. So I think I make sure to tailor the pitch to specifically what I'm interested in doing for them.
Oh, great. And I'm sure this is where going to conferences really pays off, right? Because to be able to meet these brands, the representatives from the brands in person is probably a huge.
It is huge. Yeah. I think putting a face to a name, or just being able to shake their hand and have even a short little conversation is super important. And again, it needs to be genuine. I think there are times when we as bloggers, we get panicky and we want to introduce ourselves to everyone who's at the conference, and it's not, that can work for some people. For me, I like to just pick a couple that I know I genuinely want to work with them, and I try to make that happen. So.
Well, and the other benefit of that too is I think we've discussed this before on the podcast that, you want to only work with brands that resonates with you, because that will also resonate with your audience as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think readers really pay attention to what brands you're working with and what you use in your kitchen, because they want it to be what they use too. So.
Yeah. I read this really interesting quote today that said, if you're trying to reach out to work with brands just to make money, it's probably not a good fit anyway. It really should be about you and the brand working together and helping each other reach goals.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point, because I think we forget sometimes that there's a human being on the other end of that email, and they have their own goals and mission too that they're trying to achieve. And if you want to work with them, you have to take on that mission in part yourself, through your work that you're delivering to them.
Yeah. I think one example of that would be, sometimes in the sponsored work that I do, I think it's nice to understand the bigger mission if they'll share that with you. Like, in other words,
right.
if this is just one piece of the project, if you could know the fuller project, then you can help even more.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that helps with inspiration too sometimes for the recipe or what you're going to write about.
Yes.
It's just helpful to know.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to go into specifics or anything, but I wondered if you could just share in a general way whether doing this kind of writing has been a beneficial source of revenue for you.
Yeah, it's been very good. And I think percentage wise, I couldn't really tell you for sure, how much money goes from sponsored posts versus at other things, but it's a good chunk for sure. I'd say probably more than 60% of my revenue comes from freelance work at this point.
Well, that's a great, I mean, I would imagine that's a better percentage of the pie versus ad revenue, which, can be
Yeah.
so, it could change so
Yes.
much.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. For me, sponsored posts and contributor work has been more lucrative than ads ever have been and more consistent. So,
Yeah, that's great. So like if you were new to this and you wanted to get into it, I mean, obviously, you can't put a sign on your on your
yeah.
on your blog that says hire me, but I know a lot of people will have sections in their blog that says work with me, or do you have something like that, or you think that's a good idea?
I do. Yeah. I have a portfolio page is what I call it. And I kind of just call out who I've worked with and in what capacity. And yeah, I think having like a work with me link or something like that is helpful. But I think it's also helpful to just not be afraid to put yourself out there too. I think a lot of bloggers can be afraid to be the one to initiate the conversation, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's how it has to get started, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, and in fact, I guess that is a very good point because that way you come to the brand with the vision, and that's not always a bad thing. Because sometimes I have interactions with brands in the past that really don't get the big picture about
Yeah.
online influencers and the value they bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because I think there's some brands that don't have a lot of experience with working with bloggers, and it's fine to pitch them, but just maybe go into it with the expectation that they may not know what this relationship is like, or
Yes,
they don't know as much as you do about that kind of partnership. So
you have to kind of help educate them along the way.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I imagine getting that first project is what's really helpful because then you can kind of point to those with other projects, right? And
yeah,
they give you some credibility.
yeah, absolutely. I make sure to if it was a good experience working with the brand, I make sure to follow up with them, asking if they have more opportunities and that I'd like to be in the loop with those
Yeah,
kinds of things. So,
that's great. So do you have
yeah.
any other goals that you have related to that? Like some other brands that you're thinking about you want to work with or how
Yeah.
you're going to pitch them? Or I don't know, I'm just curious if you have other bucket list kind of goals in that area.
Sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, I'm always looking for more work. But I'm also comfortable with like where I am at this point with the work that I have.
Yeah.
So I'm not pitching as much as I used to new brands, but I have done it from time to time recently. And yeah, there are a couple big brands that it's like a dream to work with them, but I haven't, to be honest, haven't had the courage yet to send out the pitch or just haven't had time to craft the pitch that I want to send. So I
Yeah.
have a very long to-do list. So
Well, I wonder if for bloggers that have a brand they want to work with, one idea, I think maybe you were hinting at this before, but the kind of research that you would do would be, to see if that brand actually has already worked with bloggers and who those bloggers are. So you can maybe even reach out to those bloggers and ask how they are to work with, and maybe they might
yep.
make a recommendation for you.
Yes, absolutely. That's been a great way for me also to get in touch with brands is through other bloggers, and other bloggers have reached out to me to do the same thing. And what's nice about that is then there's a personal connection
Yeah.
made, whether the blogger shares the brand's contact information or they, are the go-between. That seems to have worked really well for people in the past.
No,
And
that's
for
really
me.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
so you talked on your site about the job that you had before, and that there was some low morale at your day job before you quit. And
Yeah.
I know you were speaking specifically about your job at the paper that you used to work with, but I don't know. I was just surprised to see this. Like it seems like a trend that a lot of people have to deal with jobs that have really bad morale in the office. Isn't that just so surprising sometimes?
It is. It's sad too because
Yeah.
I wish that wasn't the case more often than not, but it seems to be. So
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, after you quit your job and started blogging full time, like I have a tendency to think of toxic work environments as a little bit like you're in a smoky bar, and when you leave, the fumes just kind of hang on you, and sometimes
Yeah.
you can easily start doing some of the same things at home, in your freelance work or the blogging work that you might have found yourself going on, things like that going on in the corporate world. And I'm just curious if you have some tips for like how to make sure that you fumigate yourself from all that stuff when you get home, start your own job.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, it was really just constantly reminding myself why I am doing what I'm doing with the blog, and like why I'm passionate about it, and not letting the insecurities that I had at my day job, if you will,
Yes.
get, just creep into my job as a blogger. One of the issues that I've had with any job really is that I tend to I put too much work on my plate at
Yes.
once,
Yeah.
which causes, a great amount of stress. And that's probably been the hardest thing for me to move on from, from working at my job to working on my blog, is to just give myself some time, or just not put too much on my plate at once, because it affects the quality of my work. I see it, I can look back on posts and remember how I felt when I was writing that post. And it's like,
Oh.
okay, this, my work is not as good when I'm overdoing it. So,
That's so funny because I do that with home projects. Like let's say I'm painting a room or whatever. I feel like I want to have the experience of painting that room be amazing. So like I'll listen to an audiobook that I really love or great music because every time I walk by that room, I am going to remember the experience of painting it.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that way.
Yes. So I love this analogy because then making sure that you don't feel that pressure or that some stress is good. You don't want to have too much
Right.
though.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some level of stress is motivating for sure.
Yeah.
But there's like that panicky feeling that I get that is just such a clear memory from my job at the
Yes.
newspaper, that I'm like, okay, no, we don't need to go there. Like, let's just
Yes.
take it down a notch. So
I
yeah,
love this quote on your site. I want to read it to you.
sure.
I don't blog just because I want all the peoples to read my blog. I do it because I am passionate about it to my core, and I can't imagine anything else that would get me out of bed before the sun rises every day. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's true. And just, it's still crazy to me that I have found something that I am that passionate about doing, but it's a gift really to be able to do that.
Okay, can we talk quickly about the process that you go through for creating a blog post? Because I'm always intrigued by this question with people. Can you talk about like the steps that you take, when you're getting ready to publish a post, or, not actually like, I click publish here or whatever, but
Right.
more
I
about like
go
the
into
editorial
WordPress. Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of finding inspiration for a recipe, I don't know. I kind of have this running list, like in my head, on my phone, on my computer, of recipes that I want to work on. And I kind of go through those, and I will make the recipe and test it, and then photograph it if I feel like it's ready to go. And then usually, well, it kind of depends just on my schedule. Having my daughter here or not, or, any number of factors about what's going on. I will either try to edit the photos like right after I take them, and then write the post, schedule the post on social media, like try and get that done. That usually I will try to do that a few days ahead of time. Sometimes like last night, I was up until like 11:30 trying to get today's post out or ready to go. So
Mm.
it can be really down to the wire. But one thing that I'm not very good at is planning very far in advance, so I don't make like a bunch of recipes all at once and then, post them over the next month. I know that works for some people. For me, I've tried doing that and I feel like I almost forget why I wanted to make that recipe in the first place when I go to write about it. So I kind of
Yes.
need it like fresh in my mind when I go to make the recipe. So it's a little hectic. Probably not like the smartest way to do things, but it works for me, and it's been the way I've done it for a while. So
Well, it sounds
yeah.
like your creative flow comes from that, so that makes sense.
Yeah. It's just, I think like we had said about the stress, I need just like a little bit to keep me
Yes.
motivated. So,
Right. Do you publish on certain days of the week?
yeah, I usually post on Mondays and Thursdays. So I've tried doing 3 days a week, but it just is a little too much for me. So,
I get that. I
yeah,
sometimes am surprised or amazed when I hear people that say they publish, 4 or 5,
I
sometimes
know
6 times a week. I don't know how they do
it's
it.
amazing. I don't either, but good
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, good for them.
And
Exactly.
for us, because then we get more of their recipes. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a great way of looking at it. Do you plan out then, like let's say you're looking at the month of April, do you plan out the month of what you're going to be posting on, or do you kind of just what inspires you in the moment?
yeah, it's a mix of both. I have like a planner that I will try to write out for the whole month what I'm going to make, but
Hmm.
sometimes I'll look at my planner and I'll see what I wrote down. I'm like, no, I don't want to make that anymore. Or I don't even remember why I wanted to make that. And
That was so
or
last month.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, or like, yeah, I found another idea more recently that is more inspirational to me. So, but yeah, as far as planning ahead goes, that's the most I'll do. So, and then as far as sponsored work, I'll, fill in the holes with the calendar where I have sponsored work. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's very
yeah.
good. Do you have a current like social media platform that works really well for you as far as traffic?
Yeah, Pinterest has always been like a huge uh driver of traffic for me. Um, like really big. So,
Yes,
that's been really great. Facebook,
I know.
another love-hate relationship.
Yes, I get
That's a whole
that.
other story. So,
Yes. Okay, so what's your number one tip for helping somebody who, they may be trying to grow their audience?
hmm I think just sharing your content. I get emails from bloggers who have just started, and I don't know if it's amusing or it's funny to me that they sometimes don't share their content like on social media
Mm,
or just in email or anything. And it's like, how are people going to find your work, if you don't share it? And I know that's hard to learn because
yeah.
I remember being a new blogger and being like, oh, I just feel like I'm like being like I'm just like touting myself too much,
Yes.
like I'm just
Or
like
being
promoting
obnoxious or
my
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's funny even now I feel like the amount that I share is obnoxious, but like it's not as obnoxious to other people. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It doesn't come across that way, or at least
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't. Um so yeah, I think just sharing your content, and I think just working on making the best possible content that you can is always a good goal.
Oh, that's really good. In fact, I was at a conference over the weekend and I heard somebody say, which I thought was really good, just imagine there's somebody out there and they want to hear about your stuff. So
Yeah,
how are they going to find out if you don't tell them? I thought that was
right.
really good.
It's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so just some fun, quick questions at the end of the interview. So, what's
Sure.
one food item you can't live without?
Oh, bread.
Bread. Oh, of course, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Girl versus
Yeah.
dough.
I know. That's really predictable.
Any particular kind of bread that you like the most?
I mean, I like baking quick breads. I do like eating them too, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'd say quick breads are probably my favorite, or muffins.
like
I kind of
banana or what's your favorite flavor?
Oh, blueberry.
Ah,
Yeah.
Blueberry quick bread is so good.
It is so good.
I made
Yeah.
a lemon blueberry one recently, and I mean, I had to stop making it because I think I made like 3 or 4 loaves. I'm like, okay, this has got to be over.
That's when you freeze it and like hope that's gonna prevent you from eating it, and then you end up like taking out a slice every once in a while.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
What's a favorite app on your phone?
Oh, Snapchat. I love Snapchat.
I do too. It's kind of
It's
a
so
new favorite of
fun.
mine.
It's like the Wild West of just sharing crazy stuff.
Yes.
It's just fun. Yeah.
And people being real. I love that.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
And sometimes real is kind of dorky, but
I
whatever. I think
know.
it's really great.
Yeah. I like being able to see that side of people. It makes them more, I don't know, relatable.
I agree. I agree. So do you have any time for TV? I know you've got a little one around, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you do, and if you do, what's your favorite show?
Yeah. We do watch a lot of TV. I don't we probably watch too much, but right now we're really into House of Cards. We're trying to finish the latest season and it's
I
been
love
really
House of
good.
Cards.
Yeah, it's so good. We tried to get my parents to watch it because my mom just loves political shows, but she like couldn't get into it. And I was like, you are
Really?
missing out. You don't even know.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. So we love that show.
It's like I'm intrigued now. Why doesn't she like it? I want to know.
I know. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know. To be determined.
To be determined. And sometimes I've been that way with shows, and you got to give it a little bit of time, and then
Yeah.
you fall in love with it.
Right. I don't think she gave it enough time,
I
clearly.
think,
So
yeah, I think so.
yeah.
Yeah, we're still in the middle of the last season, and so I'm
Okay.
like, oh, I can't. I want to watch it every single night, but yet I
I
also want
know.
to, spread it out too.
Yeah, we've been pretty good about spreading it out. We like watch one episode a night and then we're like, okay, we should probably do something productive
If I was
with our
completely honest with you, I would probably binge watch and watch it to the very end. And my husband's Mr. Well, I don't know, why don't we save it for next week?
Yeah. Uh-huh. My
Yeah.
husband tried suggesting that we watch Game of Thrones too. He tried suggesting that we would wait until the whole season, this upcoming season was over, and then
Uh,
we would watch it. I was like, no.
yeah, that's not
We
happening.
can't. Yeah, I'm like, we need to keep up with the show. So.
I can't handle everybody else in the world knowing and me not.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
So our husbands could watch it together very slowly,
Yeah.
and you and I can binge watch.
the deal.
I love it. Okay, so how can people find you online?
I am at Girl versus Doe. Everywhere except Instagram, I have girl underscore versus underscore doe.
Was Girl versus Doe taken on Instagram?
It is, yes. So
That's
frustrating,
frustrating, huh?
but yeah.
It's another great example of like when new social media comes out to just go in and grab your
Yes.
domain name, whether you think you're going to use it or
So
not.
true. Yeah, I was Steph M. Wise for the longest time on all of them, and I finally switched like a year ago. Should have done it a while, but yeah.
That's right. Hindsight's what they say, 2020.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Stephanie, thanks so much. I had such a great time talking with you today.
Thank you. This is really fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much to Stephanie Wise for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to go to choppedpodcast.com to buy your ticket to the Chopped Conference, learn more about today's show, and you can sign up for our newsletter to get information on the latest things about all things food blogging. Tune in next week as I talk with Tiffany Angeles about overcoming money hangups. Hey, a lot of us have those, and as creative entrepreneurs, they can really hold you back. Tiffany shares some great tips on how to identify any money hangups we might have and how to get over them. It's great stuff, and I'm so looking forward to sharing that interview with you. I hope you're loving the Chop podcast. You can show your support for this show by leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher, sharing about the show on social media, or even leaving a link on your own blog or podcast. And you know I love getting your emails, so keep them coming. I hope you know how much you inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.